Prepare to feel old. That's all I'm going to say. Chevelle's La Gargola, band's 7th album, which comes 15 years after their first album, Point Number 1, 1999. It's about half my life ago, and I remember whenever Point Number 1 came out, I was definitely a fan of what Chevelle was able to do. The follow-up albums, Wonder What's Next, and This Type of Thinking Can Do Us In, were definitely both albums that had tracks that were played just seemingly on repeat on radio stations around this area. These guys are very, very big, and definitely throughout their aging process have not slowed down, should I say. There'll be some that'll disagree. There'll be some that say that if you pick up a Chevelle record, you kind of know what to expect. There's not going to be a myriad of evolution that's involved. It's going to be something that's very cut and dry, which is kind of a disservice to the band, considering there have been hints and glimmers every so often, and it's been more so an expansion of their repertoire as opposed to just a complete reimagining of it. So, in a way, if you are a Chevelle fan and you pick up a Chevelle album, you do sort of know what to expect. However, it's really a question as to whether what you get is a little bit more toward the radio-friendly side or a little bit more toward just kind of trying some new things out and making an all-around complete album. La Gargola might actually be that long-awaited complete album, and of course the real funny thing about this is that a complete album doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the album that sells the best as compared to all of the rest. Really, a lot of people, myself included, consider Wonder What's Next to be just a monumental album, but This Kind of Thinking Can Do Us In just really had overall more of a complete feel to it. This actually is able to enhance that even further, considering they've had a couple of years and a couple of albums to really expand their horizons ever further. The very first thing that I think about whenever I listen to this album and whenever I've completed a couple of listens was the very last track, Twinge. The reason why is because this is almost like Chevelle doing a lot of service to Chino Moreno and company over in the Deftones. There's definitely a very seductive side to this song, one that really experiments more on atmosphere and really touches more bass with things that you would deem to be rather un-Chevelle-like, very unconventional for the band. This is not something that uses the same direct pattern that the band has used in the past in order to really achieve a kind of haunting sound. And this is definitely since it is such a strange and different song, it certainly gives it a different edge to it. It certainly gives it an instant memory factor because it does sound unlike what you've heard in the past. Another thing that I like about this group, especially on this album, is certainly the expansion of some of their compositions in general. There are a couple songs right in the middle of this album, Hunter Eats Hunter and One Ocean, that eclipse the 5-minute mark and actually come close to bordering the 6-minute mark, which is something that in alternative rock you don't see all of that often any longer, but this was something that was quite commonplace in the 1990s. In fact, it wasn't uncommon to see an alternative rock band go into the 6 or 7 minute range, whether it be alternative rock or just even standard Britpop. I'm looking at you, Oasis, for your Be Here Now album with songs post-bordering 9 minutes. And this was something that was really very, very appreciative. I'm also looking at the Verve, too, with a lot of their compositions easily pushing 6 and 7 minutes in length, with one, I believe, on Urban Hymns pushing 9. This is a way in which a band is able to really record a complete album, something that has a lot of different factors that gives it an edge over their other material, where perhaps they've taken safer routes, either that or really been more concerned with writing with the idea of radio airplay in mind. This is actually an album that I've not heard a single from yet, but I believe the first single is Ouija Board or Take Out the Gunman. It's one of those two tracks, but I've not heard it yet on the radio, which to me seems a little bit surprising, considering the quickness of the radio playing Hats Off to the Bull off of their last album of the same name. I really enjoy the fact that this is alternative rock that seems to also have a lot of dedication and a lot of, subtle little jabs, either that or subtle little thank yous to some bands from the 90s that perhaps may have influenced them. I hear a little bit of Bush in some of this music, and it's not so much in the rawness of the voice or of the music itself, but just somewhat in the guitar tone. This is something that also reminds me a little bit of Tool, and also offers, of course, the Deftones' edge. The atmosphere and the way in which the songs flow, how they kind of don't need to all be aggressive. Some of them have a little bit more of a slower kind of churn to them. Definitely pushes a little bit more in the direction of the Deftones and Tool. However, with Bush, there's definitely a lot of atmospheric elements that you perhaps heard on 16 Stone, or even some moments of Razorblade Suitcase, that definitely would suit this album to the T 100%. More so 16 Stone, considering Razorblade Suitcase relied a lot on atmosphere and a lot on minimalism. Minimalism is something that you get a little bit on this album with songs such as Twinge. So overall, the one thing that really makes this album very complete is definitely in its variety. Traditional Chevelle fans will certainly be pleased with this album because there will be plenty of stuff on here that will instantly sound familiar. It will definitely not put them off so much to the point where they're going to dismiss this album. Instead, they're probably going to praise this even higher than some albums from the past, considering they're hearing a couple of different tones, and their favorite band is now starting to experiment with other elements of their musical sound. People who perhaps have written off Chevelle over the past couple of years for writing very similar ideas from album to album, if they listen to this album, may actually be very pleased in what those couple of albums have now yielded based off of just a couple of years worth and a couple of albums worth of musical evolution. Overall, this is a very strong album. This is one that I certainly highly recommend to the alternative rock fan and even to the casual metal fan, considering this is one where you can enjoy it, especially if you have any sort of background in what many people would consider to be radio-friendly alternative. But that said, I would have to give this album a solid 82 out of 100. This definitely impressed me and kind of surprised me. I was one of those people who, whenever I listened to Chevelle, I always enjoyed the material, but definitely noticed some of the similarities. That's something that wasn't necessarily true on this album. While it does bear in mind some of the same signatures of the past, it definitely showcases that the future is one that has a lot of experimentation perhaps on the horizon. And that's something that makes this a very, very promising potential turn for this band's career into something even better. So be on the lookout for their next album, because it may actually supersede this one. But for now, definitely check out this one. Definitely pick it up. For those who listened, what was your favorite track? What's your favorite Chevelle album if this one maybe wasn't it? And what is your overall opinion of this band? I'm Coverkiller Nation, and remember, it's dangerous to go out there alone. Here, take some great music.